My name is Jeff Lyons. Who knows what I do? What's my job title at Channel 14? Does anybody know what I do? Yeah.
You tell the weather forecast?
That's right. I tell the weather forecast. Does anybody know what that's called? There's a science behind putting a weather forecast together. Does anybody know what that is? How about you?
It tells you what it's probably going to be tomorrow.
Yeah, I tell you what it's probably going to be tomorrow, right? Whether it's going to rain or if it's going to be sunny like it is today. And there's a big long word that describes what that is, talking about and figuring out weather. I'll bet you know right here.
It might rain sometime.
Well, it might rain. Yeah, it might rain over the weekend. Do you know what it's called? I'm going to give it away. It's meteorology. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah!
Some of you have. Good. All right. Well, in meteorology, we talk. It's okay. I'm going to turn some lights off. Is that all right? Can I turn off just this front thing of it, maybe? How about that? Is that good for you back there, Mr. Dave? You can still see? Okay. So, we get different kinds of weather. And who knows where the weather comes from? Where does it come from? Yeah.
The sun.
Yeah, the sun is part of it, right? The sun heats up the earth. And where else does the weather come from? What's that? It comes from the sky, right? From the atmosphere. And we have different kinds of weather because of the water cycle, right? Have you ever heard of the water cycle?
Yeah!
All right, now we're talking. So, there are three things that happen in the water cycle, and I want to see if you can tell me what they are. The first one is where water goes from the ground up to the sky, and the sun is part of that, right? When the sun shines down on the ground, it makes the water go away. What do we call that? Yeah. Evaporation. Good. How does evaporation work? Can you tell me? Like what happens when something evaporates? If I had a pan full of water here and I set it down and it evaporated, what would happen to it? Yeah, it would go through the water cycle. It would start out as a liquid that you could drink and it would turn into a gas, right? It would disappear, okay? Like outside on your playground, I'll bet it was real squishy when you came in a couple of weeks ago after all that rain, right? You probably couldn't even go out. And then, after a couple of days of sunshine, what happens to the ground? It gets nice and dried out, doesn't it? Now some of the water gets soaked into the ground. It goes down and it helps the grass and the crops to grow. But where does the rest of it go because of evaporation? Yes? Yeah, it goes up into the air. And it keeps rising because water vapor is light, right? It's lighter than the air around it. So it goes up, and eventually it runs into cold air, which is up here, maybe 10, 20, 30,000 feet up. And when it runs into cold air, what forms up there? How do we know that water vapor has gone up into the cold air? Yeah.
A big cloud.
A big cloud forms. Sometimes little clouds, sometimes great big clouds. And do you know what we call that when it goes into a cloud?
Cumulus.
That's a cumulus cloud. Boy, you're way ahead of me. You kind of run faster. What do we call that when it turns into a cloud?
Right.
Yeah.
Cumulus.
No, they're cumulus clouds, but it's called condensation. Okay? And condensation just means that the water that you couldn't see, because it was a water vapor, turns into a cloud. All right. So now the cumulus cloud moves along up here. Remember, clouds are made out of water, right?
Yeah.
They're not made out of whipped cream or feathers or ice cream or anything like that. It'd be nice if they were, but they're not. So they're made out of water. They come over, and then what comes back down to the earth?
Rain.
Rain, right? Or sometimes instead of rain, if it's cold enough, what do we get? Ice, right? Snow, sleet, and hail comes from thunderstorm. And does anybody know what this big long word says right here?
You should. My question.
Not preposition. Looks like it. Do you know?
Evaporation.
Precipitation.
Oh.
Precipitation, right? So we have evaporation, condensation, and precipitation, and that's what makes the water cycle. Now because of that, we get different kinds of clouds, right? Not all of them look alike. Can you read it for me? Let's see if we can all read it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Cumulus clouds. Who would like to read about cumulus clouds for me? How about you right here? Real loud for everybody. There. Rising. Cooler air. Condensing. Remember, it cools down. Thunderstorms, right? So So you're all right on that. Most clouds eventually will produce rain. It sometimes takes a long time for it to happen. And cumulus clouds are, like you said, regular clouds. We see most of the time when you look out. In fact, today there are a few cumulus out there right now. And they are very common because we always have some moisture going up into the atmosphere. And finally, we're going to talk about clouds that are close to the ground here that are layered up. Can anybody remember what those are, or do we just want to put the name up? Okay, you want to, what do you think? Oh, they're not nimbo stratus clouds, but you're very, very close. They are stratus clouds. These are not producing rain. If it has nimbo in it, like nimbostratus, cumulonimbus, that means it's producing rain. So these are not yet. They're just stratus clouds. So you were on the right track. Would you like to read about stratus clouds for us? Nice and loud. Go ahead. Layer clouds that are close
to the ground.
Right. And they tell us a change in the weather's on the way, right? Because when we see cumulus clouds, we know something's probably going to happen in the weather here very soon.
And the darker clouds are the nimbostratus clouds.
There you go. Now you're right. And can you read that bottom line there? Sometimes called a what? It's a weird word, isn't it? A mackerel sky. Does anybody know what a mackerel is? Anybody caught a mackerel before? Maybe you've gone deep sea fishing? It's a big old fish. Right. Now, look at the fish over here, the mackerel, right? And look at the sky and tell me what you see. What? You see a mackerel, right? You see a cloud. What do you notice about the two? Compare one with the other and tell me what you see. Yes?
The top of the fish, it looks the same like the cloud.
Yeah, the back of the fish looks like a cloud. And back in the old days, before I was around, which is a long time ago, the fishermen, the sailors, pirates, I guess, when they would see a mackerel sky like that, they knew the fishing was going to be good. So they bait up their hooks and they throw their nets in the water because the weather, the sky was telling them fishing would probably be good. Fish like to get hungry and will bite your bait when the weather's changing. Usually they like it when storms are moving in. Sometimes they'll bite after a storm goes through, but usually it's the other way around. And stratus clouds oftentimes will come before we get thunderstorms or rain. Okay, what kind of weather do you think we get with a cloud that looks like this one? You think it's just a nice sunny day, or you think it's stormy with tornadoes and lightning and thunder and hail and wind? What do you think?
A nice sunny day.
No, not a nice sunny day. Although it's sunny over here where the picture's being taken, but I mean right under this cloud, what do you think's going on? Probably not anything good, right? That's called a cumulonimbus cloud. Big long word, but it just means thunderstorm. Now these can be 50,000 feet tall. That's 10 miles tall. Huge cloud. And they contain rain, hail, and lightning. And sometimes they can produce a, what is that word?
Tornado.
Yeah. How do you think they do that? Let me show you. Inside, this is a cumulonimbus cloud again now. If we were to just slice it in half and draw some arrows and things on it, we have air going up, right, the updraft, and we have air going down, the downdraft. And it goes around and around like this, okay, like a Ferris wheel. All of you have been on a Ferris wheel, right? Like been on that? It's going crazy, right? You go around and around. Well, in a cumulonimbus cloud, because we're pulling warm, humid air up, it freezes up here. Remember, it's cold the higher up we go. So we get these chunks of ice, and that comes down here, and that's called, remember what that's called? Not snow, but in a thunderstorm. Chunks of ice. Hail, right. And rain, of course, and if that air starts to spin like this, there's your tornado. Yeah. Now with thunderstorms, we always have what? Lightning. Yes. And lightning is formed or is caused because a cloud has an electrical charge. All right? Just like if you scrape your feet across a carpet, you touch somebody on the nose, what happens? You get a shock, right? Well, in a cloud, because of the friction in there, it gets a huge electrical charge. And that then sparks down to the ground. The ground doesn't have a charge, or it's negative. So it comes down. And lightning can be very dangerous, you know. It can shock people. It can start fires. It can do all kinds of things. In fact, it's very hot. So it, not only can it start a fire, because of the heat, it makes a shock wave in the atmosphere, and that's what we hear as thunder, okay? So when there's a flash of lightning, usually shortly after that you hear thunder. You always have to have lightning to get thunder. But sometimes we can have lightning without thunder. If it's far away, you can't always hear the sound of the thunder. And it can hit not only on the ground, but it can hit water too, right? And that's really dangerous because if you're out in a boat or you're fishing or swimming, you could get hurt by the lightning, even if it's far away like that. So, what about them? What's that?
It can, like if you're riding a boat, you can fly because the lightning hits the water and it flashes.
Yeah.
And the boat hits.
Yeah, it could cause some problems out there. About 200 people either get killed or injured by lightning every year. So that's why I always tell everybody, if you hear thunder, like you guys, if you're outside and you hear thunder, go inside, right?
Yeah.
Because you're safe in a building like a school or a house or even a car from lightning. That's a safe place to go. Now, why do you think lightning is hitting this big tall building here, not this one down here? That's the Empire State Building, by the way. This is New York City. So why do you think it hits a big tall building? Yes. Because it's taller than the rest. The lightning wants the easiest way to get to the ground, and so it hits the tallest object it can find. Now, New York, these buildings are over 1,000 feet tall, but if you walked out on this field over here, you might be the tallest object. All right, even if you're only 4 or 5 feet tall, or six plus, like me. And as that lightning comes down, if it's on a building, sometimes they have a big thing on it to catch the lightning. Do you know what that's called right up there at the top? Anybody know what it is? What do you think?
The radio tower.
Well, there is a radio tower in there.
Like
That's
radio
very good.
signal.
Yeah, there's radio and TV towers in there, but it's also a lightning rod. And so the lightning hits that, it goes through some cables into the ground, and everybody's safe. People can keep working in the Empire State Building, and there's no problem. If lightning hit this school, same thing. The school is grounded, and it probably has some kind of lightning rods on it, so you're safe inside a house or any big building like that. Sometimes lightning can even strike an airplane. You see that plane coming down there? Now, what's an airplane made out of?
Metal.
Who knows what they're made out of? Yes, over here.
Metal.
Yeah, they're made out of metal, aluminum and stuff like that. And so when lightning hits the metal, it goes over the skin and then into the atmosphere. And the people on the plane stay safe. Airplanes are designed actually to get hit by lightning. I mean, they'd rather they not. The pilots try to avoid flying through a thunderstorm, but if they get hit by lightning, everything works just fine.
Yeah, but how does lightning get charged?
How does it get its charge? Because in the clouds, the air is moving all the time, right? And that creates friction, which generates electricity. You know who figured that out? Benjamin Franklin. You know how he did it? You know the story of Benjamin Franklin?
No. I got that in my
A long time ago. You might read about him a little later on. He was one of the first that came to the United States, right? His name is on the Declaration of Independence, among others. That's right, yes. I think he helped write the Constitution. Well, I hope I didn't get that turned around. But anyway, he was one of the founding fathers of the country, but he was really interested in lightning and science. And so he went out, he kept saying, we gotta figure out a way to prove that there's electricity up in the clouds. So you know what he did? He took a kite and he flew it. He waited until a thunderstorm came up and he let a kite go up into the sky, right, during a thunderstorm. And on the end of his string, he put a key, a brass key, and then he had somebody else hold the string. Ben was smart, very smart. And lightning hit nearby, and he noticed that the string near the key had started to split apart because he thought the static electricity was in there. And then he got somebody else to put his finger up toward the key, and they got a big spark. All right? And I'm sure that nobody else wanted to help Ben out with his experiments anymore, but he proved that there was lightning, or there was electricity in the clouds. Because at that time, electricity still wasn't understood very well. And they didn't have lights, you know, they still were burning whale oil and kerosene and things like that. All right, so From lightning, we go to, what's this all over the highway here? Hail, right? And hail comes in the form either of little bitty pieces of ice, like about the size of a pea or a marble, or it can get bigger, like a golf ball size, okay? And as we get hail around the area, we can get damage from it. Look at that. That's somebody's windshield. Looks like a baseball hit it, doesn't it? But that was actually just a piece of hail. And hail can cause millions of dollars worth of damage, like to car lots, you know, like where they sell cars. If you go downtown here in Owensboro, there are all the car lots there. Is it Don Moore? Or is right along 2nd Street. And you see all those brand new cars parked out there. Well, if a hailstorm comes up, there's nothing they can do, and they all get dented up, and it's bad. And another group that worries about hail is farmers, right? Because if you have a big bean field or a wheat or corn, any of those crops, when we get hail, it just mows them down and takes the leaves off of them. So it can be pretty bad. Now from hail, sometimes those big storms, those big cumulonimbus clouds we talked about, can produce a tornado. I want you to tell me when you think you see a tornado in this video. Okay, watch very carefully. Just shout out when you think there's a tornado. There's a tornado. Good. All right. We're not going to slip anything. This tornado is just forming, which is why I ask you to keep a very close eye on it. But you'll notice as it gets stronger, it's starting to knock down power lines, and that's those big flashes of light that you see. Up here you've got debris flying around. And
It's sucking everything into it.
yeah, it is. It's sucking stuff into it and blowing around. Now the storm is fully formed, and it's moving right across a highway here. You see cars trying to get out of the way. Some of them didn't stop in time, and they were able to get away from it.
Did it move houses? Brick houses?
I didn't hit any houses on this one. It just hit a couple of buildings here, and now it's going out over a woods. And as it goes along, it's putting up debris in the air, and that's how people get hurt in tornadoes. They get hit by wood and planks and 2x4s and stuff that are being thrown around by the funnel. This, by the way, is called the funnel cloud. And as it goes along on the ground, as long as it has warm air to draw on, it'll keep going. Sometimes you can have, how many tornadoes are there? 2. Yeah, you can get a couple of them at the same time. And these tornadoes split apart for a while, and then they came back together.
I watched the movie. One had 5 tornadoes.
Yeah, sometimes you can have several on the ground all at the same time. So tornadoes, we get about over 1,000 of them a year, about 1,500 a year in the United States. And it can happen any time of the day or night, right? So you always have to be thinking about it. Now, a day like today, no tornadoes. But on a day where we're having thunderstorms, or might have thunderstorms, then you always have to think about it might happen. Now, tornadoes don't happen that often. You know, we see them on TV all the time, and we talk about them a lot, and we practice our tornado drill here at school, but we don't have a whole lot. But it only takes a couple to really cause problems. So that's why we have to have a plan when there's a tornado. Where is the safest place for a tornado? If you're here at school, where do you go? Where do you go? Yeah.
In the library.
In the library, probably in the middle of the building, isn't it, without windows? Yeah. Where do you go at home if there's a tornado? Tornado warning for Davis County. Yeah. Your hallway, good, and that's fine. Does anybody have a basement in your house? That's a good place to go. That's probably the best place. Or a cellar, basement. A closet is a good place. A bathroom without windows, right? You guys know it. What about? Should we go in the attic?
No.
No, bad place. Why? Because it's up high and close to the roof. Sometimes the roof gets damaged or even taken off of a house in a tornado. So no attics. You want to stay low and away from windows. Now look at this map. This looks like chicken scratch, doesn't it? Actually, if you stare at it long enough, you'll probably get a headache. So I will show you. Now I'm getting a headache. Here we are. This is Davis County right here. And Estes Elementary School is about right where my finger is. Okay? look at, and those red lines show where tornadoes have gone by over the past 60 years. So these all didn't happen yesterday or last week. This is over a long time. What do you notice about Davis County and Estes School? It's never been actually hit directly by a tornado, but we've had several that have been very close by. So that's why it's important to have a good plan and to be ready for tornadoes. Every county on this map has had a tornado at least once in the last 60 years. Okay, and I live over in this county, Vandenberg, but you can see all of them here have had at least 1 or 2 tornadoes go through. Tornadoes are in different strengths, right? We have weak tornadoes, which are like 0 and 1 over here, EF0, 1, and they have very weak winds, or relatively weak. 85 miles an hour I think is pretty strong, but for a tornado, that's just the bare minimum. Down here at the bottom you have your strongest tornadoes, and those are the ones that cause the worst damage out there. Tornadoes can happen at night, remember that. I mean, we think about them in the day because we see pictures all the time, but they can happen at night. They also can happen 2 at a time, as you saw in the video there a minute ago. We have them in cities, right? Like Owensboro has had 2 tornadoes come right through town, right up Frederica and kind of over here by the bridge. Yeah, and there are different tools that I use to forecast the weather and to tell you whether or not we might have a tornado. Who knows what that one is? Does anybody know what that is? Yes. It's a satellite. Good. And it's out over the earth, about 22,000 miles up, and it takes pictures of the clouds, right? Because remember the water cycle, the clouds are where all the weather comes from. So if we can look at clouds and know what's coming our way, I can tell you several days ahead. Well, it looks like some clouds are coming up. This is the Pacific Ocean out here. So in the old days, you didn't have a satellite, you just looked out your window. Well, you can't see very far, right? We can maybe see over to Indiana or over to Hancock County on a clear day, but the satellite lets me see all the way out past Hawaii. So we know many days ahead what's coming up toward the tri-state. And the other tool we use, does anybody know what that is? Or you can read it up there at the top. What is that? Yeah. Can you tell me? No, this is maybe right here. Doppler radar, good. And radar is probably the most important tool that we have. Yeah, it looks like a water tower, doesn't it? You see the rainbow down there? Sure. But that is what the radar tower looks like, and this is what radar pictures look like when they come to the station. How many of you have seen that on TV before?
Is that you?
And that's me. Yeah, that's what I look like when I'm all cleaned up. So we have different things on the radar we can show. I can show you where the lightning is going to strike, or where it has hit, which is what I'm doing here. And on this night, we had a big line of thunderstorms coming in. So we went on television and we were talking about and warning people what was headed their way so they'd be safe.
How come we don't hear anything?
Because I have myself turned off. Just hearing one of me is enough. You don't want to hear 2 of us. Our radar can look at clouds not only from the top but from the side. Remember that picture I showed you, the cumulonimbus cloud with the swirly lines on it? Well, that's kind of the same thing. And by looking at that, we can tell if there's a tornado in the thunderstorm, if there might be some hail or winds or anything else, even heavy rain. And we can also, or I can also, all 3 of us, the weather guys at the station, we can move the radar around to show where the storms are, and the most important thing we do is warn people where they're headed. And we call that storm tracking, right? And I'll draw a line on there and show that the storm, like on these, they're moving to the east at 40 or so. And so people that live up here like in Posey and Henderson and Union counties, they're going to get some bad weather. And so a lot of times when we have a radar that looks like that, we'll be on the air for many hours talking about it and alerting people ahead of the storm that it's coming. And then after the storm, what do we get? Sometimes a rainbow, right? What do you need to have a rainbow? Rain and a bow, right? Rain and you need sunshine. And the way a rainbow forms is over here, you've got rain coming down from the clouds. You can't really see it very well. And back here, where we're standing, the sun's shining. And as it shines down here on the rain, you get the colors of the spectrum there, the rainbow, right? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. Good. Indigo, violet, yeah. If you want to go fancy on me. So that's how we get rainbows. So weather can be both very beautiful like that, or it can be pretty scary when we have storms. And there's a nice balance between the two. We have a lot more beautiful weather than we do storms in that, but it's always good to be prepared.